All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome aboard. This is Syncromystic, Episode 1. I'm Wayne McCroy, and this is Richard Willett, and together we're going to explore the deep esoteric roots of the world we live in. We're going to dig deep into the rabbit holes that most people are afraid to look down, and we're going to bring some things to the surface that you may have been unaware of. Hi, Richard. How you doing today?
I'm really excited to do this and really pleased that I get to join you on there. A lot of the stuff that I've learned, guys, through the years comes from Wayne. I stole it from Wayne, basically. But he's really genuinely added to my knowledge massively. And one of the very few that looks at these things in terms of how the original concepts were supposed to be and how they've been hijacked and manipulated how they're being used today to manipulate us and you. And this, to me, is our birthright to know this information. And Wayne is one of the few people, as I say, decoded this. He calls it synchromystic metadata. What is that, Wayne?
Well, I like to call this concept synchromystic metadata. Now, this is information basically out there in this grand information field that exists around us. And all sorts of people from all walks of life, they recognize that this information field exists. They just differ on what it is that they call this information field. Now, some popular terms for it are maybe the quantum information field. The occultists call it the Akashic record. And the programmers, the social engineers of this world, they call it the collective unconscious. And that's what Carl Jung referred to it as. Now, certainly, everybody agrees this is out there, and this represents in different scientific paradigms as things like genetic memory and epigenetic memory and stuff of that nature. But certainly, we could all understand that there's this information field that exists around us. And sometimes, if you know how to access that information field, you could decipher some of the things going on in the world. And I call this synchromystic metadata. And I like to refer to the greater information field as what is called the zeitgeist. It's a German term. It means spirit of the time. And that's because it gives you this overarching view of things going on in the world. And there is a spiritual component to it. And that's what a lot of our scientific paradigm overlooks, is the spiritual connection to all of this, but it is most certainly present and it is a part of it. So what I seek to do, and what you're seeking to do here as well, there's very few of us actually doing this, is trying to pick apart this synchromystic metadata that we see in the greater information field to try to understand what it is that these dark occultists who run things and these elitists in this world are trying to pull off, because they understand a lot of this stuff in a far superior fashion to all of us, because they've been taught and raised and brought up in this type of occult education that we have. For if we could decipher some of the clues out there in the hidden symbology, we could better understand perhaps what they have planned for us and what their plans are that they want to instantiate in our future here. So that's the importance of all of this. It's understanding, first of all, this is one of the ways how they manipulate us without us realizing it. And this is also important to understand what it is that they're doing, because in order to understand it, you need to understand a little bit of their belief systems. And this touches upon all of that.
Yeah, this is what we want to try and do. As I say, there's not nothing out there that's trying to do this and look at it in this way. And so the first subject matter that we're going to come to is something that we've both recently been speaking about. It's a concept I've seen in Tracy Twyman's Clock Shavings, but I'm sure it's elsewhere as well. And all these things overlap, guys. So remember, we're trying to teach you what they believe, not what we believe, and what the specific guys that are in control or close to the people that are supposed to be in control anyway, what ideas they're putting in their heads. So remember, when you look at these symbols and signs, it might mean something else somewhere else at some point in time. It's not what we're looking into. We're looking at what this cult, this death cult that's moving towards these end time prophecies are pushing people towards. So the first thing we were looking at, wasn't it, was the checkerboard, really. It's these two cubes. It's the white cube and the black cube. Now, I kind of understand it as the white cube being Zion or the New Jerusalem, and the black cube being the land of Nod, where Cain was banished to, Would that be something along the lines that you kind of understand it, mate?
Well, if it's all a matter of semantics with the language, but essentially what they do represent is the black cube represents the Saturnian principle and the white cube represents the New Jerusalem. So it's the opposite sides of the spectrum. And certainly what we can garner from reading into Tracy Twyman's work, and this is actually something that's been postulated elsewhere too, that I found. I've been delving a little deeper into this notion. You see, what it is that seems to be taught among some of these high level occultists of the various more magical occult fraternities, they seem to think that the underworld, as they would refer to it in some of the ancient mythologies, consists of various spiritual realms that coexist alongside of us or just outside of the bounds of safety of our reality that we exist in. So they talk about the dissolution into chaos. And you know, of course, if you've been looking at this stuff for any length of time, the Freemasons have a popular phrase that they like to use: order out of chaos. Well, chaos, this would be the infernal abyss, the area outside of our known reality, this spiritual realm, the underworld, which exists in. This is what has been postulated by some of the secret schools, that Cain, when he was exiled from the Garden of Eden for his transgression, his murdering of his brother Abel, he was outcast into the land of Nod. This is how it's recorded in the Bible. But where is the land of Nod? It is not said to be by scholars a specific place that actually exists in this world. So it's always been a little bit of a mystery to researchers. So Nod represents just being away from here in some other area. Now, many occultists postulate that this is because this is within the primordial chaos, that is the abyss, the underworld, if you'll call it that. And this is where Cain went to settle. And this is where he found other people, other beings that existed there. And he took a wife there. And he had children. And he built a city, which, according to the story, he named after his son. But some have postulated that the city that he built was actually he named the son after the city, and some postulate that they are one and the same thing. And this would be the city of Enoch. And here's where the rub is. In the Bible, there are actually two Enochs. Cain had a son. He bore a son named Enoch. And then the other Enoch that came from the line of Seth came later. And this is the one that, according to Kabbalistic tradition, was transfigured into Metatron. Now, this is an angelic being of great power, and it is associated with a cube, Metatron's cube. If you've been looking at any Kabbalistic things for a while, you understand Metatron's cube. Well, this is concurrent to the white cube, the New Jerusalem, this kind of thing. The interpretation is there. Well, the opposite of that, and you know as well as I do, Richard, because we've been looking at this for a while, that these dark occultists who run things in this world and the technocrats, their minions, they always look for the inversion principle in everything. So the Enoch that was born of Cain is the exact inversion of Metatron, of the Enoch born of the line of Seth. So he built this city named Enoch in the underworld in the land of Nod, and it's a black cube. That's the shape of it. It's said to be, the city is said to be a cubic city, and it's black, and it's named Enoch. And some in the occult have speculated that the city and the child of Cain are one and the same thing. So to me, this automatically began to scream of transhumanism, to scream of AI, artificial intelligence, because if you look at some of what's been postulated here in our world here, in our scientific paradigm, if you've been looking at this stuff for any length of time, you'll think back about a decade or so when a company called D-Wave came on the scene with an adiabatic quantum computer, and it's shaped like a black cube, and the CEO, or the chief operating officer, I think he was the COO of the company at the time, compared it to being next to an altar from an alien god. So you could see the connections to artificial intelligence, to secret technologies, and you could apply that to the same notion in the underworld. So we have the black cube and the opposite, the white cube. Metatron's cube, if you will, in the Kabbalistic tradition. So they're trying to recreate this type of a vehicle because they see the cube as a vehicle to be able to ride out the coming apocalypse here. That's essentially what they're trying to do, because it looks like if you go a little further in the teachings here, you'll find that the flood that's recorded in the biblical narrative and in the other mythological narratives across all of the ancient world, there's more to it. There's another component to it. It wasn't just a physical deluge of water. You see, it even informs us in the Bible that the heavens were opened up, the waters of the deep opened up. Well, this is actually in esoteric language referring to the abyss, this outside primordial chaos, the underworld. So it leaks into this reality and it creates this situation where everything is dissolved back into chaos. And this is where the alchemical portion of things comes into play. So everything is put in this state of dissolution, and from it, on the other side, is born a whole new world order. So that's essentially what they're looking at right now as far as the meanings behind this. Now, this does go a lot deeper, and I suspect it'll take us more than one episode to break all this down. But there's a basic synopsis of what's going on. So the notion is Cain built this city of Enoch, which may or may not be the same as his child, in the underworld, and that this is going to be an infernal ark of safety that is the exact inversion of the New Jerusalem talked about in the Bible, the white cube. So we have the black cube and the white cube, and all of the symbolism is ever present through all of these occult fraternities and secret societies. So I'd like to hear your thoughts now, Richard.
It's absolutely fascinating, this one, for me, because it overlaps in everything. Literally overlaps is not is a pun, I suppose. What I'm about to talk about is, so when you look at the symbology of this, obviously you've got the black and white chessboard as the chessboard you've got behind you, which is very much kind of appears to be the foundation of how they build this reality. There's that connotation. There's everything that they talk about in Habbadism or Habbadniks is, and Kabbalah, and anything mysticism, Jewish mysticism, theosophy, seems to be duality, this world of duality that they want to shrink back down or combine back down to one, the singularity, which is impossible, because without two you can't have one, because how could the first one know that one exists? You need the opposite to understand that the first one exists possible. So they're trying to mathematically change the nature of reality and restructure it, play God, basically. That's what they're trying to do, and it all folds back to the same mentality. And when you look at the Star of David, so obviously some people say it's the Seal of Solomon, the Star of Remphan. People argue about this stuff all the time. Don't get bogged down in the details and the arguments about the labels. Look at the signs, symbologies, and what it triggers within you, regardless of the names people give it to. So the Star of David, let's call it that, because most people do. Seal of Solomon. That's just so above. All that is the so above as below triangles, superimposed over the top of each other. Now, this is where it gets really fascinating to me. When you look at the popes, you have the black pope, the white pope, and you have the grey pope in the middle. They always say a combination of the two. Now, I wonder, are they trying, in their principles, I'm not talking about in reality it happening, they might try and stage this. I suppose they will. But in their principles, are they going to try and have heaven and hell be the combination of the two, the singularity between the two, as the new order of things? Does that kind of ring any bells, Wayne, at all?
Well, yeah, it certainly does ring some bells, but just as a little nugget of information for you out there, the six-pointed star, the Star of David as we see it, this is not the true Seal of Solomon. This is a misconception that has been foisted upon the people by some of the higher adepts of these occult orders on people. They want people to associate that as the Seal of Solomon. You want to know what the true Seal of Solomon is? It's the
Absolutely.
Ouroboros. It's the
Right.
snake eating its own tail. And this is where other connotations of things come in, because there's always this reptilian component to all of this too. And there's a reason for that. But like I said, I mean, this will definitely take longer than one episode for us to unpack, because the layers of symbolism are so deep with all of this. But just to get back to the point here, yes, this is about writing out the apocalypse, or what they like to call the double cataclysm that's coming. This was referred to by Falconelli in his book Mystery of the Cathedrals in the end chapter, talking about the cross at Henday, which is described by Jay Widener and Vincent Bridges as a monument to the end of time. And I think that's what we're seeing coming to fruition right now in the world. This is all this apocalyptic type nature of things that we see manifesting. It's the end of time. And I guess seems to be a cyclical thing if you go back and you listen to some of the old occult records of these things. It occurs roughly every 2,000 years or so in that way, and something major happens, a big cataclysm that changes the face of what society and the world look like. So it would seem we're at the precipice of this end of time notion, which they describe in the occult literature as a type of a thinning of the veil between worlds. So at some point, what happens, if you go and you look back at the old mythologies, these worlds collapse in on one another. And if you look at some of the symbolism that's inherent in the Kabbalah, then you'll see these worlds collapse into one another. So at some point here during this double cataclysm or this apocalypse that they're talking about in the near future, the veil is going to be so thin that the worlds collapse in on one another. So heaven, hell, and earth will all exist in the same type of muddled soup. They'll commingle together for an unreally known period of time, because it's hard to measure time when a portion of this exists outside of time. These two dimensions that we would call heaven or hell, they exist outside of the bounds of time. That's something that's inherent only here in our world, in this physical manifestation that we live in, this ark of safety, this alchemical flask of sorts that floats in the sea of dissolution or chaos, the abyss. All of these things, when they collapse together, it'll create a timeless type state of being where these worlds commingle for a period of time that has, as we would experience it here. And then from that, on the other side, everything will be born anew and we'll have a new world order. And you always wonder where that comes from. Well, it comes from the deepest, darkest, oldest occult secrets that they keep in these secret society groups, a new world order. And that's what they seek to try to hijack, in a sense. These dark occultists who run things, they want to be the ones that guide and direct the course of what they call evolution and how we emerge on the other side here. And they want to be the gods and controllers of this place on that other side. And they think in their hubris that through the use of high technologies and various other means, they can achieve this. They could actually hijack the ark of safety that is the New Jerusalem and ride out the coming chaos. And on the other side emerge as the new gods of this place, the new builders of this world. So you'll see, if you've been researching any of this stuff for any length of time, there's a lot of terminology there that is all part of their hidden language. The Freemasons refer to this as the green language. It's also known as the language of the birds. It's also known as the phonetic Kabbalah. There are many names for it. A lot of conspiracy theorists, speculators call it twilight language or predictive programming. It certainly exists. It's all out there. It's part of this synchromystic metadata, as I like to call it, that they use to communicate ideas in very obscure ways that most people won't pick up on. So that's what's important to decipher here and to understand what it is that they have in mind. Now, I always caution people, whether you believe any of this or not is irrelevant. It doesn't matter. It's what they believe that's important, because the things they do to act upon the things they believe in will affect all of us. And that's the important thing. That's why you need to understand, what is their modus operandi? What do they believe? What do they want to bring into being? And how do they do it? That's what we're exploring here today.
Oh, it's absolutely fascinating. What was fascinating to me the other day was I don't know if you know Wayne, but my great great grandfather William Willett was one of the guys, or the main guy, that introduced daylight saving time here in the UK. He was a Grandmaster Mason, I believe. And people will be like, "Oh my god, I never knew him." Although I do look a lot like him, which is really disturbing when you see a picture of him. Honestly, his face is my face. But the weird thing is, obviously, Trump's coming out, and he came out 2 days ago, maybe yesterday, saying he wants to abolish daylight saving time in the US. Now, I straight away said this has to do with occultism. This has nothing to do with you having to set your clocks back and forth, obviously. The weird thing was, when my dad passed a few weeks back, He passed. He's Willett, Barry Willett. So that would have been his great great granddad. He passed on the day they moved the clocks um, forward. Was it spring? No, spring forward, fall back. So backwards. So he passed that night about an hour before that it was done, and then the next day the clock actually in the living room never works. He's the only one who could get it to work. Started going at the right time and then stopped again. And I swear that's true. My dad passed away. I'm not going to lie about that. But there's other things going on in this world. But my point is that Trump knows this. He was trying to abolish the daylight saving time, and I don't have the answer as to exactly why, but I know that it's something to do with Chronos time and those sort of beliefs. Why would he try to set that back? Is that something to do? Was that a cog in the wheel? Was that a spanner in their works that was put in place? Because everyone thinks all Freemasons are bad. My dad, he would have been he was a Grand Master Mason, but that seemed to be something they want to correct. Why would they be care? I mean, all the things in the world he needs to sort out. Why is he bothered about daylight saving time?
Well, it's a matter of perception, really, because time is something that we perceive. And that's something that's unique to this reality we live in. And it is kind of a human construct in a lot of ways. Now, we have these natural orders and cycles of time that occur that are pretty much handled by what we would call the sky clock, or the motion of the sun, the moon, and the stars in the sky, and the planets, and all of these things. This is a natural system of time in which we live in. Well, daylight savings time, what this has done is it's created a synthetic version of timekeeping. And this has been done, and it jacked up the calendar. Let's put it that way. We really are not in alignment with the natural cycles anymore. And that's part of this. Now, why exactly would they be looking to abolish this daylight savings time thing now? I don't have necessarily the answer to that, but I suspect it has to do with this notion of the coming of the end of time. So it's kind of an occultic principle that's being played on. And make no doubt about it, Trump is their trump card in a lot of this. And they always leverage these types of things, language, in many ways. And you'll notice there's been a lot going on in the news cycle lately that you'll see, especially over here in America. If you've been paying attention, you'll notice that there's a certain corporation that keeps cropping up over and over and over again in the news media cycle. And it's been kind of loosely associated with Trump, and that would be McDonald's, the Golden Arches. And this is really an interesting crossover point that really leads to some of the things that are actually currently going on right now today that are important. So we have this notion of the Golden Arches, McDonald's, and being associated with Donald Trump, McDonald. Mick, if you have been following any of this conspiratorial stuff for any length of time, is an abbreviation, MIC, which means Military Industrial Complex. So it's becoming Donald's Military Industrial Complex, and it's been associated with a lot of different things in recent weeks, if you've been paying attention. First of all, McDonald's showed up a lot in the presidential campaigns because it was said that Kamala Harris, in her young college years or something, worked at McDonald's for some time. Well, then they made a mockery out of that, kept McDonald's front and center in the minds of the people. And then Donald Trump showed up at a McDonald's on film, working at the McDonald's for the day. And then shortly thereafter, McDonald's was in the news again because they had an E. coli outbreak in their onions. E. coli, a disease, an illness. So this showed up, McDonald's. And then once again, after the presidential campaign was over, Donald Trump and RFK Jr. and Elon Musk were all on Trump's private plane eating what? McDonald's. Most people overlook this stuff and think it's coincidence, or they just don't even notice. But there's a reason that the news media has kept McDonald's front and center in your mind for this extended period in the news cycle. And then, lo and behold, a couple weeks later now, just this past week or so, you had this huge event that was touted all over the news media about this guy who went out and murdered a CEO of the United Healthcare Company, the insurance company in New York City. And then he was later captured where? At a McDonald's. Why is this? Why is this front and center? This is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about synchromystic metadata, and I'm talking about this hidden language. Well, it seems to be that this MIC, military industrial complex, under the leadership of Donald Trump, they're up to something. And this has been pre-echoed out there in the news media and in the entertainment circles for a long time now. And now what do we have going on? What's the big news story? Well, we have all of these mystery drones. It's always in the language, isn't it? Mystery drones showing up everywhere. Now, they're rebranding the UFO phenomenon again. They first rebranded it to the UAP phenomenon, and now it's going to be called mystery drones. So we have these mystery drones cropping up all over the place, and I think there's a connection there for certain. So what do they have in mind with this? Well, it would seem it's some type of a psychological operation, first and foremost. And secondly, there's something hidden going on about it. They're being disingenuous. When the news media in unison tells you something like this, and they use this kind of Twilight language to describe it, there's something going on. So these mystery drones, is it really a mystery? First of all, that's one of their most favored terms they use to describe any types of this occult knowledge. Mystery. So it's a mystery drone. And I find it compelling. They're describing these things as drones without even knowing, is there a pilot in this or not? They're describing some of them as being the size of an SUV or a car or a school bus or some such thing. And we have all kinds of video of these phenomena circulating from all over the earth right now. They're coming in from all over. So this isn't just centralized in New Jersey, as they've been speculating and talking about for some time. And it's all part of a normalization campaign, and it has everything to do with the military industrial complex and the new presidential administration that will be stepping into power come January 20th here. So it's a signal out there. It's an esoteric or occult signal for people in the know. Now, what exactly does it all mean? I don't know, but it seems to me they're going to be escalating some type of military technologies in the coming months. And are they going to go ahead and try to do the Project Bluebeam thing? Maybe, maybe not. But I also have discovered through some research that some of these drones are identifiable, and they're actually produced by a company right over there in the UK where you're at, Richard. It's a company called Overwatch. Interesting name for a company, isn't it? Overwatch. And these are what are called loitering munitions. So I would urge listeners to go and look up loitering munitions and see what they are. Not only are they surveillance platforms, but they can be weaponized. So these have strike capabilities, and they are all controlled through an autonomous artificial intelligence. And all they need are directives. They give them a target, and they could go blow up a target. So this could be a perfect cover for a fake UFO invasion, can't it? Maybe they're really going for it this time. I don't know. I don't have all the answers, but I do find this stuff concerning and compelling. So we see the connections here with the new administration coming in and all the escalations. We have seen escalations in Syria now. Syria has been overthrown, and we have all of this going on in the world. And this is all part of the dissolution back into chaos once again. So that's a lot, but go ahead, Richard. I want to hear what you think.
Well, the McDonald's thing is absolutely fascinating. So straight away, your mind starts to kind of program into this stuff. So McDonald's obviously is the golden arches of the two golden arches of the or arch of the M. Well, the golden arch, what would be arc? What's the golden arc? It's the Ark of the Covenant. Is the Ark of the Covenant. So to me, that represents the golden ark coming out of the Ark of the Covenant, which will go in Solomon's temple. And even if that sounds as mad as it does, Donald Trump has a replica of the gold Ark of the Covenant at his Mar-a-Lago sleaze pad. So they do absolutely believe this stuff. So you could take that, maybe, possibly, that the McDonald's logo being used is a nod and a wink to the Ark of the Covenant. I would say that's a possibility, a high likely. And it's fascinating when you look into the Ark of the Covenant. So the Ark was, I've got a bit of text about it here. The Ark was the most significant object in the Old Covenant worship. It was a box overlaid with gold in the most holy place, which is Solomon's temple. A golden urn holding the manna, which would some people say is the what's that monatomic gold, but it's something that either heals you or it's a kind of
Ormus.
conductor, isn't it?
It's called Ormus. That's what you're thinking of, the monatomic gold.
Is that what it
Ormus.
is? Almost,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and it's the same thing. I think it's a semiconductor, but it can be used for many things, and I think it was possibly the stuff that that they put on bread and they ate, and they say is immortal, give them immortality. There's lots of things around about this. It's from this magical. It goes back to alchemy. So the Ark of the Covenant has apparently had that inside it. But what is fascinating about the Ark of the Covenant as well, guys, is that it was covered with blue when it was transported, and the blue covering was the protection of Shekinah, which is the female aspect of Yahweh. This is why you have this blue teal like looking color on most of these buildings, including Jeffrey Epstein's island, including Columbia University, where they had a particle accelerator, by the way, guys. They use this blue teal like color, Peter, teal like color, to protect the gold as it's going through. And what was absolutely mind blowing to me was that the Statue of Liberty, Liberty is Isis, Semiramis, or Shekinah. Now, all the same character. It's this kind of Virgin Mary type character, the mother who protects you, which goes back to alchemical principles, which is the blue light shift away from you. As the light gets away from you, it gets more blue. It gets closer to you, it gets more red. Or is it the other way around? It's closer blue, red away, I think. Um, so this blue is a protective thing. It holds you in. It brings you in like a magnet. Whereas the red of Yahweh is aggressive and pushes away. This is alchemical principles. This is exactly what it is. So basically, so what they managed to do, and this was fast, how long ago they put these things in place. Now, that Statue of Liberty, Shekinah, is overlooking the Chabad sect and many of these occultists in Brooklyn, New York, where they function out of. That was put there to keep the exiled Jews, faith, or Israelites in safe. So she's keeping them safe there. And what's fascinating is that that was gold originally, like the Ark of the Covenant, and gradually, in a reversal of the blue covering the gold, the blue, because the gold oxidized, which was the copper, into blue. They reversed it. How long do you put this in place to see a massive statue reverse the principles of Shekinah? So now it's blue and it's protecting them when they're coming out and starting to do these things out in the open. That's fascinating. And if guys, you think that's just a principle of it's oxidized, look at the flame. It's still gold. The flame is still gold because that's the spark of every Jewish spark or Israelite spark or godly spark in every human being that are trying to release. Now, when you look at RFK Jr.'s um, monument where he's dead, and you look at Lady Diana, what is it? It's the Liberty Flame, the eternal flame. It's gold, because they believe that they used these people, obviously, RFK and that, but they provided a service, and it's almost a way of them saying, "Thank you for your participation in our messianic agenda, lunacy. Off you go. Now you are free." Does that ring true to you? Because to me, it's like so obvious that that's what they've done. They see that in their twisted mental madness of this messianic cult, they see it as not killing you, is releasing your spark to live forever or return back to the iron soft, I think they call it, which is the original um, white light before it retracted itself and made this world. And that's a whole another story. But that's fascinating to make something out of copper, knowing that nearly 100 years later it would oxidize at the right time to overlook with that blue teal color, Peter Teal, um, to overlook this Chabad sect. And it's a protective. The Statue of Liberty, liberating the gold flames that spark within you in the husk of what these Kabbalistics call. So they say basically, I think what they're getting at is that the Gentile is the husk that's basically covering up this, I wouldn't say Jewish spark, but this godly spark inside you. and they have to get rid of the husk, which could be interpreted as getting rid of anyone who's not one of the 12 tribes of Israel. I would say that's probably what they're getting at the top levels. Um, it's fascinating how this is woven into it. Once you start to pull this apart, the McDonald's sign is the Ark of the Covenant, the two arcs of gold coming out there. That relates back to the Statue of Liberty, to Shekinah, to this Chabad Lubavitch messianic guys that are deeply in with Donald Trump and Netanyahu and Zelensky and all of these. It's like, it's incredible when you see the planning that's gone into this, isn't it? Does that ring true, any of that to you?
Well, it is certainly the game of connect the dots, and that's how these people operate. Now, there are multiple layers of symbolism involved in all of this, and I do find it interesting and compelling, too, what you're saying here about the Statue of Liberty with that bluish color, that feminine aspect, the Shekinah side of God, that the feminine principle, the divine feminine, if you want to call it that. Well, this also relates to materiality. You see, the same word, the same root word for mother is the word for matrix. So is this actually designed to keep us in the matrix? Is that what's intended there? Is that what this is all about? Now, you'll remember back a couple, has it been a few years now since the major outbreak of these fires and stuff in California and Hawaii? Do you remember the fires in Hawaii and how people were speculating it was direct energy weapons and stuff like that, and that they kept showing all over the internet these blue roofs that some of these buildings had that didn't burn, and they said the blue protected them. There's all this stuff always out there, pre-echoed in the news stories and the media. So there's something to it, and it is a type of an occult signaling process going on. It is this hidden language that we've been talking about. So there's certainly something to that. And I find it interesting that Trump has a replica of the Ark of the Covenant at his estate at Mar-a-Lago, which, by the way, did you break down the word Mar-a-Lago? Do you know what that means? It means the lake within the sea. So it's a smaller version than the grand version of the ark. So there's a big ark and a little ark. There's a lesser ark and a greater ark. And this is how the occultists work, as above, so below. There's the macrocosm and the microcosm. So maybe there's something more to that going on. Maybe this is kind of symbolism in and of itself as well. And these things don't get their names by accident. Mar-a-Lago, sea and the lake within the sea. So the smaller within the greater, the microcosm to the macrocosm. So maybe Trump and the Trump administration has something to do with this coming apocalypse that the religious cultures have been talking about for a long time, and what we see pre-echoed all around us and what the occultists talk about. So there's a lot of interesting crossover there for sure, but I don't have all the answers, and I know you don't have all the answers, and the best we could do is speculate and throw out there the things that we do know, and maybe somebody else could come along and add another piece to the puzzle. It is a big puzzle, and certainly you can see all of the planning that's gone into this. Now, I would argue that there's a beyond human intelligence that directs a lot of this and brings some of these things into fruition, because it doesn't seem logical on the face of it to think that human beings can plan this intricately, certain of these different things that occur out there in this greater information field. There's a spiritual component, like I said, and that's why I like to use the term zeitgeist to describe this information field, because there is a spiritual component to it. Now, this has been recognized by occultists and scientists and religious folks all across the board. They all admit there's something to this greater information field, but they can't quite agree on what that is or what to call it. And this is where in the dark occultists who run things have an advantage over us, because we can't agree what this is, and therefore we don't really study it or understand it. And they could manipulate that against us. That's why they use this hidden symbolic language to communicate ideas. Now, they've put it out there for anyone with eyes to see now, that you could know that there's a major shift coming in the world once the Trump administration gets back into office. And this was pre-echoed with McDonald's, a worldwide recognized company and symbol, the golden arches, like you had alluded to there. And the arch is an important structure to the Freemasonic fraternity, as well as some of the others. It represents the keystone. You have to have a keystone to hold an arch in place, don't you?
Mm.
And there's some important context to that. And I'll further add that this Italian sounding gentleman that I shouldn't say gentleman, this guy that they allege murdered the CEO in cold blood in New York, you'll notice he was captured at a McDonald's in Pennsylvania, the Keystone State. So the symbolism always runs deep. This is this synchromystic metadata that I'm talking about. There's always an interlocking connection like this that goes along with it. And most people overlook it or they don't even recognize it. And it takes a little bit of skill in discernment and a little bit of practice to do this. But certainly you can make these connections. And Richard, I see you've gotten a bit better at doing this too, making the connection from the golden arches to the ark of the covenant and this different connection. And there is always, it would seem to be a Jewish component to a lot of it, and that relates back to these traditions of Kabbalah for sure. But there's more to it than that. There's many different levels to this, and there is infighting at the topmost levels of these dark occultists who run things. They all want to be in charge. They all want to become Lucifer, all of them. And that's what it's all about at the end of the day.
It's absolutely fascinating, this stuff is, and as we go through it, it's sort of, it is like there's not really a podcast like this out there that you start to go ping ping. Oh, that recognizes, like, it is a murder mystery type feel. I like what you said about that. Maybe we could just to touch upon that. Is that you said that it's an intelligence from out elsewhere, and as you said, he was found in McDonald's in the Keystone State. Now that would imply people would listen to that and go, well, he must be in on it then. But if there's an intelligence outside this source moving the pieces around, he doesn't have to be in on any of this, does he? He might not. He'll be totally. He could be totally oblivious. It's really fascinating,
Right.
isn't it? Because at that level, you get who knows what about what, who knows anything about this
Right.
stuff, and who doesn't, and who's being used, and who's. That's where it gets really fascinating because I think we do tend to, no pun intended, see things in black and white terms, and some people don't have a clue that they're playing their role in this stuff. Most people don't have a clue, and that young man, how would he known he would get caught in McDonald's? You don't want to get caught, obviously. So why would he be in McDonald's at the Keystone State waiting to get caught just to fulfill some sort of prophecy or some language? What is it all about? It's so fascinating.
It is fascinating, and this is why a lot of people will come up and they'll say, well, not all Freemasons are bad. No, they're not. Most people
Mm.
that get involved in these secret society groups, they don't have the first friggin' clue what they're getting involved with. They really don't. They have good intentions, and they're just part of the broad power base, and they don't know what goes on at the highest, most levels of this. And a lot of it has to do with ritual magic and different occult aspects to that. But that's a show for another day. But certainly, most of them don't know that they're getting involved with something nefarious, first of all. And second of all, they don't want to believe that. And they'll toe the line because they think, because of what they've been exposed to, that it's all just good and it's a nice social club. And if you join this group, you could have some nice spaghetti dinners and raise money for children's hospitals and maybe get a square deal down at the car dealership and stuff like that and be part of the big club. But that's not what it's about. That's all just surface level stuff. And that's how they maintain their grip on power. Because all these guys that belong to the lodge, they all vote the same way. They all do the same things and support the same things because they are bound by a blood oath to do so. So, therefore, they will toe the party line. They will uphold the Brotherhood's good name in public and not reveal the secrets to the profane, and that's you and I. So you have this argument going on, but it makes sense to me that there are spiritual components involved in this, spiritual intelligences that guide and direct things. And in fact, this is even admitted when you actually get into the writings of many of these people that were involved in these secret society groups. They will admit outright that they are guided and directed by some spiritual entity or intelligence in much of what they do. And sometimes the way all this stuff falls together, you can't explain it just by human intelligence alone. So it's all a matter of pattern recognition and recognizing that there is an intelligence to how this stuff manifests, but it can't completely be explained by just human beings in high places, although they do have a part in it. So I hope that's an appropriate answer to that. Because no, most people that get involved with this stuff, they don't know what they're getting involved with. And oftentimes things just seem to play out in ways that go beyond their awareness level with this stuff. So we could certainly see the connections, though, if we look back with hindsight and understand what's been done here and know what we're looking for. Looking at the commonalities in this synchromystic energy field out there, the information field, the zeitgeist, if you will. So connecting the dots is an important facet to doing all of that.
Yeah, you could even see this podcast as part of the other side of doing that. If there's a duality, there has to be the side that's unveiling this, or unveiling, that's the word, this information to the profane, as they want to call it. Because this information is coming out freaking fast now. It has been for maybe 100 plus years, but now it's just like even the last 2, 3 years, even faster than that. You can't ignore it. One thing I really liked what Tracy was talking about, and I didn't know about this, and I still can't find anything other than what she's talked about on it, is the game of Agio, the original kind of, or an early version of the game of chess. And what I really liked about it, was fascinating to me, is that they all know, the participants playing it, that the white cube or the white side is going to win in the end, and the purpose of the game is to be on the right or light side at the end. It's so fascinating because that's almost like jumping on the arc right at the very end, isn't it? There is an element of these people causing so much chaos and mayhem, but at the end they want to be on the right side of things, and that's where this whole kind of the doing bad deeds really leads to good deeds, which is bloody stupid because they're opposite energies. They never will be the same. But that game is fascinating to me. That I genuinely believe that that's what they think. They're going to be able to switch sides at the very end.
Oh, certainly. And there's a whole occult side of the game of chess. I would urge you to go look up Manly P. Hall. He talks about the esoteric side of chess, the spiritual component and symbolism of the game of chess. And I've been trying to delve into that a little deeper too. It's very hard to find information on it. There are some precursor games that have arisen to the game of chess, but nobody really understands or knows exactly where it came from. That's the interesting side of all of it. But this game of chess is an important thing. And if you know anything about the controllers of this world, you know that they very much love to implement game theory in everything they do. And this is part of the cybernetic aspect to this, the cybernetic link, the inversion principle of the old occult or alchemical sciences, cybernetics. So this is why they like to apply that principle, and they want to control all the game pieces. And that's what it's all about at the end of the day. So this is a fascinating thing. And I do intend to delve into it a little bit more deeply, but I haven't really found much of a link to what she names as this game of IGO, although there are some old Indian games and stuff like that that are precursors, recognized precursors of chess, that have some of the same elements. So whether this name came strictly from the other side to her or not, I don't know for sure, but I've been digging deep into that too, and I'll let you know if I find anything more on it, and I would appreciate if you do the same for me, because it seems to be an important element to this, because they do very much seem to be vested in the notion of switching sides at the end, and thus this is why they want to build that arc of safety, that infernal arc of safety, that black cube, and replace the white cube, which leads me just one step further into the symbology and symbolism present here with the black cube and the white cube. Well, we all recognize that this black cube at Mecca is one of the big monuments in the Islamic faith, right? Well, it is said in legend that when this cube, this black cube, first fell to earth, the rock that's in the temple Mecca, it was white. And over the course of time, because of humanity's sin or whatnot, that it turned black. So you have the black rock now, and we have the black cube and the white cube, and it's the inversion principle, and it's become black, but it is intended to be the white cube. So it is the arc of safety. It is this infernal version of the real deal. So in my view, in my estimation, I believe God, the Creator, Almighty, gave us this way to survive this coming apocalypse that may or may not be coming. I can't speak to the truth of that or not, but we are seeing the end of the age. But he gave us this way to ride out the end of the age in this white cube notion. But certainly those dark powers in the world today want to hijack that and emerge the victors on the other side. They want to switch sides at the end of the big game of chess. And they could do so by entering into the panopticon, the cube, and the second square, as Tracy describes it, in her book, Clock Shavings, and emerge on the other side victorious and be the gods of this new world order that they want to bring about. So it's an interesting line of thinking, and certainly it's not something we could completely unpack here in one episode, but that's why we're doing this podcast, right, Richard?
Yeah, again, this is the further you go and the further you look, the more questions you have. It becomes it multiplies out. You don't get less questions, you get more questions, which is fascinating. It's a fascinating adventure that this is on. And if we're in a computer game called the Duality, a multiplayer game, then this is a fascinating way of understanding it. I look at this as kind of like with the Tower of Babel, it kind of connects in that with me, in that they confused the language for us, but they kept their own secret mystery school language. And I feel like that's what we're decoding now. We're decoding the language that they have as a third language there that they kept secret, and they confused the language for us. Now we have a birthright, and we have every right. Everybody, every single human being does have a right to that language and to understand the rules of the game. And that's what we're trying to uncover here, is the rules of the game. And it's becoming quite apparent that these guys are a little bit desperate now, because they're giving all of their chess moves away because we've uncovered it. And like even with the 9/11 stuff and the IXXI Roman numerals being the sigil of Saturn, and we understand all these things, and the two towers coming down being the two poles, one keeping the heavens up, one keeping the earth from collapsing into the hell, or the land of Nod, and Atlas holding the pillars up. All of this stuff is actually, once you get your head around the duality of it and you start to pattern match, it's actually quite easy to see. And it's what's fascinating to me, Wayne, is that this is a language that they have to stick to. This is the only way they can communicate. So if you decipher their language, they have to still communicate this way. They can't change it because they'll confuse themselves. So the key is to understand how they communicate. And as you just said, with the arches of McDonald's, the keystone, that guy getting caught there. Once you see all these triggers, you're like, I can see where you're going with all of this stuff. Even Donald Trump was with Elon Musk and JD Vance at that Navy football army game, whatever it's called, and American football, Navy versus the Army, something along those lines. And they're up on the big screen. Elon Musk's in the background hovering around, although the image looks superimposed, but he was there because I've checked the video and he does pop up in the background there. And right next to them on the big screen, Palantir is sponsoring the event. I mean,
And here's the interesting thing. It's the Army and Navy game they were at. The military industrial complex, the Big Mick, like I was telling you. Do you see where this is going? Donald's Mick. McDonald's. So I find it just completely compelling. This is the language they speak. So they're telling us, hey, we're gearing up some type of a military operation here, an intelligence operation, and it's going to be something that you'll probably likely recognize. I really think they might be going the whole blue beam route. Now, in the background, you have other stuff going on in the ufology field too. You have guys like Dr. Stephen Greer came out yesterday or the day before and said that it's now been confirmed that a bunch of whistleblowers from inside the reverse engineering programs and stuff are going to come out with actual evidence and proof within the next 30 days. You might want to look into that, Richard. So you have a lot of this stuff happening concurrently. What's that?
It's called the reverse engineering for a reason. He could
Right.
he's probably telling you the reverse of what is true. There's someone I don't trust is Dr. Him. I know people who have met him, and he's not particularly pleasant human being to be around, put it that way.
Yeah, but see that's the thing. So you have that going on, and then you have Lou Elizondo has been coming out and saying, and a couple other people, by the way, have been coming out and saying things about the nature of UFOs and UAP and all of this stuff, talking about these reverse engineering programs and how people that are higher up that they know in the intelligence apparatus. Lou Elizondo said this actually in a couple interviews. He knew this guy and he said, "Hey, Lou, I want you to stop pursuing this UFO thing." And he asked him why. He said, "It's because we know what they are and we shouldn't be messing with them. They're demonic." And that's what the guy imparted to him. And he said, just wait around about 5 years. This was back in 2022. that Elizondo was saying this. He said, just wait around for 5 years. Everything's coming out in 2027. So we have all of this being talked about. And then also concurrently in the background in some of the religious circles and the speculative circles surrounding spirituality, you have some people saying that we actually entered the 7-year tribulation in 2020. So you have this timeline of events that seems to be going on here. Now, I don't necessarily think we're living in the 7-year tribulation. I reserve the right to be totally wrong about that, but there are those that seem to be pushing this notion, and the idea is out there in the greater zeitgeist. So all of these things seem to correspond around these same time frames with a lot of this stuff. And then you have a big push here in 2025 with different things coming out in the open. And of course, this will align with the new administration taking charge here in America. You know, Trump and his military industrial complex behind him. So there's so many things to unpack, and we got our work cut out for us, Richard.
It's just being able to read these things, like when you just said 2027. Well, obviously you add those numbers up, it's 11, which is the number of Crowley, the most evilest number. So it's just when your mind starts to lock into these things, 2027 is 11, Crowley's number, the most evil number, 9/11. And when you look at
27's 9, and they're both in there, 9 and 11. 27's 9, and 27's 11.
There you go. This isn't a coincidence. Now, whether you think it's human beings doing it, it's giving me goosebumps. That has, whether you think it's humans doing it or an outside source programming this stuff into where we are, I would say is probably the latter, because this is highly incredible when you start to do. So that's 9/11. Well, and another one, guys, is Donald Trump, the 45th and 47th president. Add those numbers together. 9/11. He's the 9/11 president. That's which is the when you look at Revelations 9/11, and I'm not. What I love about this podcast is because I'm not religious in any way, shape, or form, but Wayne is a Christian, and we share so much in common. And it's not about the religion; it's that I don't want people to get hurt because of this madness, and neither does he. He wants a better life for his children, and so do I. And I think most people who are religious, exactly what they want is to have a better life for their children and themselves. And there's this cult, whatever they may be, is the ones that are stopping us having the life, the golden age that they promise us. Is there the inversion of it is what they're the ones taking it away from us to a certain degree. It's never going to be perfect, but it could be better. So we're here to tell you what the coding, what they're coming out with, and it's becoming more and more apparent every day. So 9/11 president, that's the Revelations 9/11 is the Abaddon coming out of the bottomless pit. And he's even dressed as Abaddon, which is Apollyon, in one of these festivals in, I think it was Spain or Italy. They dressed him up. Big Donald Trump's dressed as Apollyon or Abaddon, which is Shiva and all of these Mars, these other. I mean, even with when you look at Elon Musk, he was in Iron Man. Well, when you look at the Kabbalah tree and the element for Mars is iron, he's Mars man. That's the whole point. Is they're telling you he was in a von Braun book. That's where he got his name from.
Yep. The Elon, yes, that was the name of the leader on the Martian colony in the book that von Braun put out. Elon, that was the name of the leader. It's unbelievable. All these connections. He's the Mars man. He's the new man, the Uberman, the Overman. Overman, like Overwatch, like I had just told you about that company that built some of these drones that are being recorded in the skies. But it all connects, and it's amazing. If you could just have eyes to see and be able to connect the dots, it all begins to make sense on just in a very intuitive type of way for the human being. This is something that is our birthright that we've been separated from. This intuition, this knowing. It's a type of primordial knowing about something. Now, my friend Crow 777 says it's like you could smell something burning in the kitchen. You might not necessarily be able to put your finger on it, but you know something's not right with what's being showed to you. You smell something burning in the kitchen. It's that type of intuition that is our birthright. And this is where this becomes more sophisticated, because when you learn to read these cues, you could apply more descriptive terms to it and understand it better as to what's being presented, be able to pick it apart. The elitists in this world, these dark occultists who run things and their minions, the technocrats, they don't want us to have this capability. And they would prefer you laugh it off and think it's all silly and nonsense than to take any of it seriously. But they take it seriously. And that's why they hide it and obfuscate it from us. Not because there's nothing to it, but because there is something to it.
It's amazing. And what we said earlier, which is they've kind of trapped themselves in a corner because, as I said earlier, they have to use this language. They cannot deviate from this code because that's how they communicate. So they don't have a choice. So all they can do now is speed up because people have decoded the code. And now they have to use the code to get it done, which is a messianic age and whatever you think is going to come of that of the New Jerusalem, and whether you think it's a positive or negative thing, these guys clearly are going to use it. They've killed a lot of people trying to make it make it happen. Um, but they have to use this code, guys. So once this code is out there, and for the lame person who just can see it when they walk past the fleur de lis and know it's the Trinity, there's no longer a power they have at all. So that's why I love doing this podcast with you, and I'm really pleased that we're getting our minds together to do this, because you also have someone to bounce ideas off. And when you question yourself, you go, "I know I see that, but it seems too obvious." You've got someone like yourself, Wayne, who's been doing this just as long or maybe longer than I have, that can see the same things that I'm seeing, because we're starting to be able to read the language. And that's my kind of aim anyway for this podcast and this show through the years, is that you guys will, along with us, help us decode this madness, because they can't get away with it. If they can't do it in the dark, people won't go along with it. There's not enough of them, and they know that. Um, and this is the key to it, is decoding their nonsense, and it's so blatant. And they're not as good as they used to be. They used to be a far better, far more intelligent, far more subtle. Now they're just so ridiculous and out in the open that it feels like there's a fail safe in this scam anyway. And I'm really pleased to be doing this with you, eh?
This has been a barn burner of an episode, my friend. I think we've got a lot more ground to cover, but I'm really pleased with what we've brought out so far, because I think this is important. This is probably one of the most important things people could really be looking at, because this is about our future. What do we want for our children, our grandchildren, our progeny coming up? Do we want them to live in a total panopticon prison control grid? Or do we want them to have some essential freedoms and be able to achieve their full potentiality as human beings? Do we want them to go that way, or do we want them to become plugged in cyborgs with no unique thought of their own, no true individuality or individuation? That's what these dark occultists who run things want. They want the Borg mindset. They want people just plugged in 24/7. So they're more easily controlled and manipulated. They see us as human resources. And they've even put that term out in corporation, corporate lingo. Corporation, by the way, the root word of which is corpse, a dead entity. That's what this is all about. Now, Michael Hoffman calls this the reign of dead matter, and he is most certainly correct. That's what these people want to bring into fruition, the reign of dead matter. It's all about these death-based ideas, and they are a death cult at the top of all of it, because that is the inversion principle. That is the inversion to life. And Christ told us he came to give us life, and life more abundantly. And they don't want us to have that. They want us to have death in its place.
Well, definitely gonna have to get a T-shirt with "There's something burning in the kitchen," because that is a fantastic saying. I love that, guys. I really hope you've enjoyed today. We'll be back in 2 weeks' time with more synchromystic metadata to kind of show you what these guys are doing. So you can find my work, my individual work, on substack.com under Some May Conspire, and iconic.com is all my video work and my weekly show. Where can they find your stuff, Wayne?
Everything is centralized at my website. That's www.alchemicaltechrevolution.com. And you can find links to everything else there. And I hope to put up a page on the website for Syncromystic now, because I think this is an important broadcast, Richard. I think we're doing some important work here.
Yeah, really unique work. So, guys, thank you for joining us. Please do share this podcast and share this show and help us. Any information that you have that we could take on board, and information that we don't know, we're obviously learning as we go along, but we are really decoding their madness now. So, thank you. I really appreciate your time for an hour today. We'll see you in 2 weeks' time.
See you next time, Richard.